man, hearing that song makes me think of that horrible video that was captured by John Resig, who he tweeted about it. Did you guys see that?
Everybody tweeted about it, Paul.
Oh, God.
Really?
The world saw that video.
Everyone is surprised to see someone who's a programmer also express human emotion.
Especially when not intoxicated. We have it on good authority you were not intoxicated.
I don't know, does Red Bull count? I think Red Bull counts.
Depends how many Red Bulls. This is the greatest opening for our podcast ever.
Ever.
So I actually hope that we can actually use, I don't know, I mean, depending on what we think when it's actually final, but Richard D. Worth, who captured all the video in D.C. this last weekend.
Great work.
What?
He did a great job.
He did a super great job. Thanks,
Richard.
And he's gonna chroma key that video, which means it's gonna exist on a transparent background, and give it to us, and then we're gonna make something awesome with it, I guess.
Is it gonna have unicorns in it?
We could have me.
We got to do the green screen introduction once we're in Austin. I think that's the operative.
Yeah, I actually own a green screen. I was really into The Matrix in high school, and I bought one, so we will be able to do that soon enough.
Awesome. So the thank you. The 1.4 release happened finally on last Thursday, and it was awesome. We are now amidst the 14 days of jQuery, where every day is a release of something new and awesome. And there's a few things going on. There's also 1.4.1 is currently being prepared, and going along with that, if we encourage everyone to try out 1.4 and try it out in your applications. And there are a few bugs hanging out, but I definitely would love to see people trying to reduce those down to test cases, submitting the bugs, writing patches, submitting them into GitHub pull requests. Just now is the time to really get into it, because there's a lot of momentum. Or you can
at least file a ticket.
Yeah, you could file a ticket.
So, Paul, what are we seeing in the 14 days of jQuery? What have we seen so far? Granted, it's only Monday, and we'll have seen more by the time we hear this. But
Paul luckily knows the future.
Yes.
Let me peer into the what is that? It's a
email client.
It's a little wiki, actually.
I think it's called a crystal ball.
Oh, right, the crystal ball known as Basecamp. There's a lot of one of my favorite parts of the 14 Days of jQuery is these little mini talks that are being hosted by yours truly. They're called jQuery 1.4 Hotness, and
hotness.
Hotness, and
with a W.
6 of them, all around 15 minutes apiece. And just kind of going into detail on what are the new things and how you would use them in real-world examples, and, they're awesome. In addition to that sort of awesomeness, there's other awesomeness. There's a lot of talks coming from John Resig, Jonathan Sharp, Mike Hostetler. There are a bunch of audio interviews that were recorded by Ralph Whitbeck and Elijah Manor for the official jQuery podcast that they will be releasing one by one. And we're also doing proper releases of the forums, which we'll talk about in a moment, the jQuery project, the GitHub and core plugins, and there's a bit more, but I won't tell you everything.
I would call that jQuery pandemonium. If I had to call it anything, pandemonium.
Pandemonium!
Paul, I think I might want to bring something up. I don't know if this is personal, but I noticed John said something when he's introducing each person. Somehow, I think you snuck into the hotel or the AOL headquarters, I think they were at, and you sat down at the table during the QA session, and you put a voodoo hex on John Resig, and he said that you would soon be a part of the jQuery team. That was a joke, right?
I believe so. that voodoo hex that I placed also, I don't want to make a big deal about this. In my opinion, it's bigger news, but I won a bet against John Resig. Okay? Let me just retweet myself. I won a bet against John Resig. Yeah,
Nice.
so
we
were talking about the 14 Days of jQuery site, and he thought that there would be more than 25% of its visitors using IE, and I knew that like developer sites never get more than 15% on IE, and after we looked it up, it turned out to be 6%, which is a third of what he was claiming.
So was it
for the record,
while you're on the
it's
jQuery
a fourth.
Yeah. Oh, math.
Yeah, math is not our strong point here, is it?
Actually, just to go along with that, I think I've checked the stats on yayQuery.com, and we get something like 3% at our height. 3%, and then of that, like, since 3% of our actual hits isn't actually that many hits, I'm pretty sure like
we know
most of them were me testing the site, noticing that it noticing it breaking, and then checking the analytics to see if anyone actually did care. And I think Jay Dalton and Kyle Simpson both cared and helped us fix that. So thanks, guys, for that fix.
Yeah, thank you.
One thing I wanted to bring up and get your guys' thoughts on this. With 1.4 coming out, I actually heard from a friend of a friend who was inquiring, and they thought that the live method was like the default now, essentially, is what they were thinking, which was like when you grab an element called click, it does an event binding, a standard binding to that element. And someone was actually thinking, what if they thought that it would be doing event delegation style binding for all the events instead. And I was like, no, that's not how it works, but it got me thinking, and maybe it should.
Disagree.
What do you think?
Disagree. I think that
I think there are some performance benefits in certain cases with live.
Yeah.
But I think it's more detrimental to do that by default because, one, what if you don't want all of the new elements that match that selector to have that event? I mean, there is something to say about explicitly binding something, so having the option. And then on top of that, I think there's a pretty high cost in situations where you have a really deep DOM and you have maybe like a difficult selector that you have to test against every parent element. Like live isn't always the best to do. It's really good whenever you have a ton of elements that all kind of match. So a table with a ton of TDs or something like that. That's going to match in a relatively non-high deep DOM.
I don't even get the question. The idea that somehow bind would do live by default would get rid of bind altogether.
Yeah, that's true.
Because there needs to be a way to bind elements. You can't take the abstraction and make it into the default case that works when you're doing it the default way. That's a mind-boggling question to me.
Yeah, and I'm with Alex that I still want to have control over this, and I think that people should just know when live is faster and know when it's appropriate and use it. But we ought to still have the benefit of doing very targeted event binding.
Yeah, I think my only thought that it would be good, and I think this would have to be tested and really validated before it went in, which is I just keep on thinking of Steve Souders and the idea of being fast by default. And I think that's a very powerful idea. But like I agree with you guys, and I don't think we can right now claim that it would be faster by default. And there's just a little bit too much ambiguity on what are the right cases in order to say yes, live would be faster for all clicks, but all submits or changes should be done through regular binding. So
yeah, especially now that we have all these other events that live can handle. If it was just clicks, maybe, but all these other events that live can handle, like focusing and stuff, that could be messy. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to give a shout out. If you really do shout out, if you really do like live events by default, event delegation is live. If you ever hear those two terms and you didn't know that, event delegation is live. So NW Events by Diego Perini, who also did NW Matcher, is a super awesome, smart dev guy who gets my badge of honor this week. And NW Event actually events does event delegation by default, so that's awesome if you want that. And he's really good at supporting that stuff. So yeah, that's all.
One thing that's also new, I don't even think it's actually officially announced yet, though, is the forum.jQuery.com. It's the new jQuery support forum. You can find the jQuery N message board has been moved to there, jQuery UI, jQuery Dev, jQuery UI Dev. They're all there if you want to get involved. It's on Zoho forums. They're being really good to jQuery and very responsive. We know that there are some, critiques that people are having in these early days, but forum.jQuery is going to be a really awesome place to get support. We want it to be full of good, useful information and quick responses, and if you need support now, it's the preferred place over the Google group. The Google group is pretty much dead in the water.
Google Groups is dead twice over officially, and through John Rezick's blog. Just a quick couple things. Again, they actually moved all the data from the Google Groups, or as much as they could, I think, over to the Zoho forum. So if you're looking for old stuff, you can even still find it there. And a lot of you might even have automatic accounts set up. There's OpenID. It's pretty sweet. There are a few gripes, and the best part is that they're really working with the jQuery team to make those things go away. So they're really trying to customize it for us, and that's, I think, why the team went with it. Just a quick note, currently the code editor isn't up to at least the par of those of us who've talked about it, but we found the best way to get your code onto the jQuery form is to write it in your IDE of choice with your spacing and your everything, and then just copy it, paste it into it without inside of a code block, and then highlight it, and then press Add Code Block while it's highlighted. I know that doesn't make a ton of sense, but it will turn it into a code block, and it will be beautiful, and you don't have to worry about spacing issues and double code blocks and stuff like that. So do that, and that will help. And props to the Zoho guys.
Also, something that came out during the jQuery 1.4 keynote is that the 14th day of jQuery is going to be the release of jQuery UI Final.
Woo!
Who's getting pumped? I actually saw a commit that the autocomplete had been moved into trunk because UI is still on subversion.
Drew Wilson, better watch out.
But so it's exciting that we're going to be getting an autocomplete. Actually, though, it is worth mentioning that Drew Wilson might not have to watch out because the autocomplete that's going to be in UI is not a fully featured multi-select combo box. So, Drew Wilson, you're safe for now.
And the other thing that I think it was decided just now, which was that they are going to move jQuery UI to GitHub. Which is definitely a big move, and I think for everyone who's lamented what's the seemingly slower pace of UI, and I don't think it is. It's a little bit harder to see the activity. I think moving it to GitHub, we're going to see a lot more of the activity, and I hope that we're going to get a lot more community contribution to it.
Agreed.
Definitely. All right, let's hop into our favorite segment, the Beginner's Corner.
Yay!
Beginner's Corner.
It's the yayQuery Beginner's Corner, where everything is new. It's the yayQuery Beginner's Corner. And Ruby, what are you?
This week's Beginner's Corner is the fact that you can set multiple things at once with methods like CSS and attr, ATTR. Instead of setting one attribute or one CSS property at a time and having repeated CSS or attr calls, you can actually set them all at once with an object instead of passing two strings to the CSS or attr method. And also, as of 1.4, we can actually pass functions to these methods as well, so that we can use some logic to determine what the object that we're passing to these methods should be. But the bottom line is, for beginners, if you find yourself using a bunch of CSS calls or a bunch of attr calls in a row, you might want to combine those into one and just make a single object that you can use instead.
We should take this opportunity to point out that that in 1.4 there's a new element creation syntax. So when you can pass, like, you're going to want to create a div, and then you can pass basically this big attributes object into it that not only includes like standard DOM attributes but also click handlers and CSS stuff. So check that out in the release notes. And also, along with CSS and attr, those two methods plus a lot of other setter methods get you can pass them a function now, and the return value of that function will be set as the whatever you want to manipulate. There's also some really cool stuff where the current value is passed into it. Definitely check out the jQuery 1.4 hotness video number 2, I believe. Which should be on jQuery14.com as of maybe today, depending on when this comes out. And that describes all that stuff. You can really check that out in detail. It's some great functionality, so check that.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch that's changed, and later in the episode we'll be talking to Yaymes Padolsey, who has a plugin, sort of a plugin that'll actually warn you when you're doing multiple CSS or attr settings in a bunch of different method calls instead of doing it all at once. So that'll be a neat thing to check out too.
Yeah. Who's talking about?
They're hidden enhancements.
What?
The little tiny things you never thought you'd see.
Oh.
Alright, this week's hidden enhancement lies deep within the AJAX functionality of jQuery. So we have callbacks in jQuery to the AJAX function. Those are success and complete and error. And prior to this addition, I think this is a 1.4 edition. This is a 1.4 edition.
Yep.
We couldn't mess with the context at all. So now we have an option to set a context flag to an element or any object that we want. But the hidden enhancement about this is the fact that by default the context is the XHR object. So you can check the URL, you can check anything you want about the XHR object that you would normally check outside or you would save as a variable. So this is kind of a neat way. Go ahead.
Alex, I think what you mean is the settings object for the AJAX call. That's what actually gets passed as the this here. Is
right.
The actual
Okay.
settings
sorry.
object. Sorry, you're calling it the XHR request, which I understand why you're saying that, but it's actually the settings object. So like the data type and all that.
Right. Yeah. So the actual object that you pass into the AJAX function gets passed into the success by default if you don't give it a context. So we just thought it was neat because normally you had to kind of save it outside of it, create it the closure, and then bring it in. And this is a nifty way to get around that now and have a little bit more API consistency as far as setting context and bringing things in with custom contexts as well.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, me? I was just going to say it's neat because now inside your success function you can look at what the data type was, or you can look at what the URL was or whatever. So you can just look at this .url or this .data type and be able to see what you passed in. So if you're doing some neat abstractions with your AJAX calls, then you can have access to that information.
If you're abstracting your AJAX calls, you probably have a cached reference to the default objects anyway.
You probably do. That was a nice little song there,
That's
Adam.
my little song.
That was awesome. And it should be mentioned that you do also have access to the XHR itself inside the success callback, as it's the third argument that's passed to the success callback. If you want it. It's all good. It's all good. You were using the wrong words, but last week I didn't know my bind, so it's all good.
I think we're gonna move on to a section of me in the future here in just a second. So Alex, if you could introduce our guests for this week, that'd be lovely.
You do it.
Then we actually just cut there.
And out.
Hi, we are here with JavaScript badass extraordinaire Yaymes Padolsey. He is the co-author of the jQuery cookbook. He is a contributor to jQuery source. The per property easing in 1.4 is his. I think Paul described him as the authority on vertical background parallax effects. Should check that out on his site. He is an asset to the community with his plugins and his blog posts. You might recognize parse scripts or regex selectors, or even Padolsey's Satisfy, which got a lot of cool play in the community recently. So welcome, Yaymes.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi.
This is great. Yeah, it's really awesome to have you on the show. We've been wanting to do this for a long time, so I'm glad it's working out. It's a lot of I think for the four of us, for yayQuery to follow your blog, and you really not only have an interest in jQuery but in JavaScript, and really like to really twist it around and do cool things with it. So let's actually talk about one of the things that you've done recently, and that is jQuery lint. So just why don't you give us a brief description on what jQuery lint is and why you made it.
Okay, right. So, well, I first came across some forum posts and on the dev list specifically, and a guy called Dave Methvin was talking about a kind of a jQuery lint-like script which would report on bad usages of jQuery's API. And I decided to have a go, and I developed jQuery lint, and I mean it's still quite a young project, but basically what it does is it will, like when you call a method in jQuery, it will compare the arguments you pass to the argument signature in jQuery's API, and if it matches then you're okay, but if it doesn't it'll report on that in Firebug's console. And it does a bunch of other small things too, but that's the main objective of it.
And yeah, so it's like, I mean, I guess it kind of takes either things that you're doing wrong or just bad practices in general, right? And kind of shouts them out to you and gives you an explanation. I was looking at it before. Is it actually, are you pulling in I guess the API XML that's coming from the new jQuery 1.4 XML?
Well, no. I mean, I'm not putting it in every time. I mean, I've just it was quite tricky actually. I got the XML and then I kind of filtered that through Yahoo's whitequil thingy, and then I outputted that as JSON, and then I put that on my local machine, and then I filtered it to get rid of all the kind of the descriptions and things, because all I wanted were the argument signatures. So right now it's just like one solid object in the jQuery lint file. Yeah, but there's like still like a few corrections that I've needed to make to it, because not all the argument signatures are actually correct, unfortunately. But yeah, so that's how I'm doing it.
And Yaymes, so if I'm a new jQuery developer and I want to be improving my code, how do is this this is just some more JavaScript that I drop into my page, or how do I add this?
Right, so you'd include jQuery like normal, and then you download your own copy of jQuery lint, and then you'd include it right under jQuery in a new script tag, and then you'd use jQuery as you normally would, and if it all works correctly, then it will report on when you misuse jQuery.
And are you getting a lot of, I saw on the mailing list a lot of people were interested in this, but you were kind of the first one to pick it up. Are you getting people who are contributing to the code now that you've sort of put a dent in it to get started?
Not yet. I mean, it's really young. I mean, I've already got like 5 issues on GitHub. So I mean, I've only fixed one of them, so I've got to just fix those, and maybe I'll get a few contributors. I don't know, but the code, to be honest, the code's a bit of a mess, so I don't blame people for not contributing. I'm hoping to do a refactor.
I think currently it has 1 fork, which I think is James, but it has 42 watchers, so I think a lot of people are paying a lot of close attention to it as far as whenever it reaches a beta point or something.
Yeah, and it's really sweet. The actually at this jQuery 1.4 release weekend down in Washington D.C. that we were talking about. We were talking about actually Yehuda Katz and I were discussing kind of the need for something that actually helps people, verify that they're not doing something wrong. And the example that he came across was someone was saying that the selector input :active breaks in jQuery 1.4, and we're like, that's not a selector. There's no selector filter active. Oh, is it focus? Yeah. Well, either way, like that, it doesn't work. Or like :hover, that doesn't work. And
I mean, the problem is that there are so many, like there are countless different things that jQuery lint could potentially protect kind of against, but at the end of the day, people need to read the documentation, and it's just going to offer kind of a light layer of protection, not anything too kind of serious, I don't think.
Right. But
so what you're saying is that it won't replace Paul's job on our podcast as the person who gives out anti-patterns. He doesn't have to worry about his job security.
Oh no, he'll still get to do that, I think. Yeah.
Good. But it puts you in a really good position to be the Papa Crockford of jQuery. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think it's very nice that you elevate a lot of the things that you do to being the types of things that won't pass lint, like not having elements, combining calls, and having multiple CSS calls instead of one, repeating selectors, which it drives me up a wall. So I think that it's kind of like a self-reinforcing thing. Once these errors or anti-patterns become reinforced in a lint, then you have more basis to tell people, look, you should correct this out of your code. It's considered bad practice.
Yeah.
And then I had a question, which is, does jQuery lint pass jQuery lint?
Oh.
Wow.
Well, it doesn't, to answer that seriously, it doesn't actually use jQuery too much. It uses, it takes a couple of methods just for convenience, like map and each. But other than that, it doesn't actually, it doesn't use jQuery, which is a benefit, I'd say. That'd be a bit embarrassing if it didn't pass. But one of the things which is quite funny is that jQuery itself doesn't pass jQuery lint, and so what I've had to do is have kind of internal flags, so that when you call a method publicly, it'll set kind of an internal flag to true, which will stop any internal code bringing up any errors. Like just for instance, internally jQuery passes null to the jQuery constructor, which isn't a value argument signature, and it's just one of those things. So I've had to kind of work that into jQuery lint.
Why do they? Why is null being passed? Is it essentially the same? Is it the same as passing like an empty array?
Well, I'm not sure. I think that was the intent. It's in the kind of the init constructor. It kind of goes lm or null or something. I don't know, but and there are other instances too where jQuery is kind of misusing itself.
Wow.
Interesting.
So this
but
is
it's jQuery, so they get to do it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
They get a free pass, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So lint is rad. I think this is. I hope to see lint being picked up by developers in their normal workflow, and because I think that by doing it, it'll actually make you a smarter developer. So I'm hoping to see things go in that direction. And thank you very much for writing this, because this is definitely like as you mentioned, Dave Methvin, he posted that thing with the idea about like 3 years ago or something like that. So
yeah,
the community has wanted this for quite a while. So it's definitely a big achievement.
Yeah, I mean, it's still got a bit of work to do on the issues, but I mean, yeah, it should be ironed out soon.
Cool. So then the other
what a better place to have a call to developers to contribute to lint with James, so we can force people to use it in the jQuery chat before we help them with their code.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
Pass this before I even have to deal with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have a link to this on the site so that you can jump on it and start at least checking it out, and maybe even adding your own linty goodness to it.
Yeah. So the other thing that we wanted to bring up was that jQuery landed a patch coming from you having to do with easing. And so this actually, you originally just wrote this as basically a plugin, sort of like a monkey patch plugin before. But then I guess it dropped into jQuery core itself. So can you give us an overview of what actually it does?
Yeah, sure. What it does is it before 1.4, when you animated something, you were able to add a single. You were able to specify a single easing function for the animation, and that would affect all properties that you were animating. And what this per property easing patch does is it enables you to have a different easing function for each property that you're animating, and that's basically it. But it does. I mean, it doesn't sound that great, but if you look at the demo, you'll see that it can be used to great effect.
Yeah, it's it's really cool. We used it in the yayQuery sing along, and specifically in the bouncing ball plugin to bounce a ball. And thank you for that. So how did I guess so since you're a contributor to jQuery, and you were mentioning before to me that you were kind of new to the Git scene, can you give people who haven't done that an expectation of or an idea of how it works?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it is pretty tricky. I'm not going to lie. For newcomers anyway. You have to fork it's called. The term is fork. I mean, I don't really get it, but you have to fork a version of jQuery, and then you modify. Actually, no. Then you have to locally build it using the make file or something like that.
Right.
And then you have to modify jQuery to do what you want. Actually, sorry, no, you'd modify the appropriate file to do what you want. So I modified kind of effects.js, then I built it, and then I tested it. And then once you're happy with your commit, the next thing you have to do is then write some tests for it with QUnit. And I didn't do that the first time, and then John Rezig said, "Can you take this away and then do some tests for it?" So I did that, and then you send a pull request, which the jQuery team receives, and then they determine whether or not it's going to be committed. And if it is, and it's just I think a click of a button for them, and then it's in the jQuery core.
Yeah.
So they get the easy part, huh? They just click a button
Yeah.
and you have to...
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask everyone's question on opinion on something? If we're talking about interfaces to Git, one thing that came up during the jQuery 1.4 keynote was this what's it called? Idea that there would be a live editable repository that people could commit code or at least attempt to like make their own patches of jQuery directly from like a live text editor kind of thing. That sounded kind of exciting and kind of dangerous.
Like Bespin or something like
like
that?
Yeah.
exactly.
Bespin? Bespin? I didn't know.
Bespin. It's named after a planet in Star Wars.
Oh, shame on me. I'm not
Lando
a good geek.
Calrissian.
Wow.
Yeah. I hope that I'm right about that. Otherwise, I'm like in that awkward middle spot.
Yeah, you're facing a terrible wrath.
I'm already facing the wrath for not knowing what that was even about.
I think the idea is rad, and you know, and actually, it goes to show you that that for JavaScript superstars like Yaymes Padolsey, even has trouble with Git, and I think that having a smaller barrier to entry, like just a plain old editor that you can test it out, run the unit tests, and then submit a patch basically straight up, would be very nice for people to basically get started with, because I think it's really, once you have like one commit that actually made it into like a core project, you feel a lot more prone to get more to contribute more, I think. So getting people involved just a little bit, I think, will definitely kind of engender a larger sense of community and kind of contribution all around.
And the flip side of that is that Git has actually enabled that way more than Subversion did. I mean, there is still this barrier with having to learn how to build it and all, but once you learn that once, you know it, you figure it out, you write it down, whatever, and then you know how to do it, and the barrier to contributing stuff is actually a lot lower than it was with Subversion. So it's still a learning process, but it's not as closed as it was, and that's cool.
Right. I was well, someone asked a really great question about how Git has affected the jQuery positively or negatively and stuff like that, and John actually answered that Git is awesome, but it's really GitHub specifically that has made things easier. Their interface and
The fork
stuff
queue
has been what has actually been the driving factor in the increase of development on jQuery. I think it's pretty impressive, GitHub, even over Git, and I think Git plays a big part in GitHub, I'd imagine. So
for sure.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you what I found great with the GitHub thing, and when everyone was pushing for the jQuery 1.4 release, is that like with every new commit that John Resig made, there were like tons of comments. Not all of them in support, but that's one of the great things about GitHub, is that you can like that you get the community's reaction as soon as it's committed, and that's pretty cool.
Agreed.
Yeah. This week we're going to talk about anti-patterns a little bit, and it's special because James actually had a few posts on anti-patterns this week. So let's get into it.
May I ask if you were onto anti-patterns before you heard them from Paul Irish, or is this kind of a kick back to Paul Irish's specific anti-patterns, or what's your thoughts on the word?
I think I heard it before, like Paul Irish said it, but I mean I didn't really look into it, because I mean the word anti-patterns, and then Paul Irish brought it up, and he kind of like solidified the definition in my mind, so I kind of knew kind of what they were, because I mean, you know, I'd looked up what they were, and it was kind of a bit fuzzy, but so yeah, I mean I heard Paul Irish, and then I thought, well, you know, what anti-patterns have I seen? Then I blogged about it.
So one of the anti-patterns that you bring up is what's a self-executing anonymous function, I guess, and which is just an anonymous function that calls itself, wrapped a whole lot of paren action going on. So if you like parentheses, you like these. So and you basically call it out as I don't know, it's like a super cool, like I'm a cool guy kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that that beginners don't understand. It's like if I saw that when I was just starting to learn jQuery, JavaScript, I just wouldn't know what was going on. And it's like, I'm not going to lie, there's a certain kind of glamour in knowing the discrepancies in a language or an abstraction.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of anti-patterns arise, when somebody's just trying to be cool with their code. And I mean, I know I've done it quite a lot, and I'm trying to cut back on it because readable code is much more important than cool looking code. So but yeah, I mean, I think that's where they come from, some anti-patterns anyway.
Yeah, I will point out over this last jQuery 1.4 weekend, we were messing with JSLint, Papa Crockford's JSLint, and this actually, the code that you feature, if the self-executing anonymous function, actually doesn't pass because Crockford wants the wrapping parens to actually wrap around the execution parens. So so there's actually two closing parens at the very end of it, which is just like bizarre, and no one does it that way.
I've seen people though complain about not being able to pass JSLint and do it though.
Yeah, I don't. Well, it's JSLint on the good parts, which is a more strict version, but I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, there was like you can get away with doing it with if you're assigning the return value to a variable, you can get away without the first pair of parentheses around the actual around the function expression. But then people thought, well, that's just dumb, because then somebody has to scroll down to the bottom of the function definition just to find out that it self-executes.
Right. Yeah, it's just more polite this way, I think.
Yeah.
I think in the good parts, he actually writes them without parentheses around it, if I remember. Actually, I have my.
So are
I have
you
my book here.
against?
I'll pen through it. It's right here.
Are you against these in all cases, or just when people are trying to be clever with them?
Is that question directed at me? Yeah.
Did it?
Okay.
Yes.
Oh no, I mean, no, definitely not in all cases. I mean, I use them quite a bit. I mean, I've even used a couple in jQuery lint. I mean, they're especially useful when you want to kind of not pollute the global environment, and you want to set up like a big object or something. Like jQuery uses it to wrap around the entire like jQuery core, and I use it similarly in jQuery lint. And so it's useful in some situations, but sometimes you just kind of use it when you don't need to. Like, you use it as kind of a visual container, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think it can be overused in certain situations.
Yeah, probably can. Yeah, it's definitely hard to have to find that balance between readability and performance, or readability and what you want, if it's going to take maybe a few more lines to finally get that. So that's always a challenge. Another anti-pattern that you bring up, and it's actually in your more recent jQuery code smells post, was going over the top with chaining. And so your example, basically you start off with A's, you add a class, you find a span within that, you add a class, you use end to go back up to your original selection, and then find from there, bind some event handlers, and so you're not so keen on this on chaining a lot with end and traversing and stuff?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, it's all about maintenance, really. I mean, if you do all that and then you say, oh, well, you know what, I really want a reference to that span so I can do something with it later. Yeah. You've got to redo the whole chain, and it would be better if you just define the span beforehand, or done it some other way. So, because I mean, I have seen some massive chains, and the ones I featured in those blog posts are actually pretty tiny, to be honest. But some people they do go over the top, and I know jQuery lends itself to chaining, and that's why it's quite appealing to some people. But it's basically, if you do too much DOM traversing, then it makes it harder to maintain.
I think the existence of the end method just sort of encourages this. You should add that to your jQuery lint. I think end is badness.
By the same token, I think that writing a long chain when you know when you're doing can be just a ticket. And I know like there have been a lot of times where like once I have a lot of other encapsulated stuff like methods in objects, it's a lot easier for me to go ahead and like kind of instantiate a whole bunch of functionality, sometimes stopping to cache references along the way, but in a long chain and bind to previously defined methods and stuff and get it all in one go. And ultimately what I'm looking for at the end is actually the original element that I started with sometimes. So I think that if you know what you're doing, you can go buck wild, but it's important to realize the difference between, you know, what kind of traversal are you doing? Are you doing intense selector traversal over and over again, or are you just like sort of neatly going back and forth?
If you have like 3 ends in a row, then something's
exactly. If
wrong.
You have multiple ends in a row, that's always like a dead giveaway.
That's what I'm saying. Add it to lint. Get rid of that.
I will, but the other thing with long chains is that they make absolutely no sense if you don't indent them. So I think that's one of the weaknesses. And some people will indent them, but they'll indent them correctly. So I mean, to be honest, I think this kind of jQuery development and DOM development, you concern yourself with traversing the DOM, and you shouldn't have to worry about traversing a chain, kind of having to navigate the chain and having to get your head around it. So I mean, they are pretty cool, and if you can do it all in one line, then it's just, that's great. But still, I mean, if you don't indent it correctly, it just looks strange, and you can't really get your head around it as easily.
Absolutely.
And one thing I want to point out, and I see this a lot, it's more of a beginner tip, I think, which is, well, I don't know. What do you guys think? So I was going to say, I don't think it's appropriate when people do, like, they go parent, 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 or something like that. Or maybe it's just parent, parent. Because I'm fairly confident that we can say that a parent with a filter is a lot faster than closest. But at the same time, like, I just prefer closest because it allows you a bit more flexibility. Like if you need to go into your HTML and wrap something around it.
Yeah, because if you end up with parent, you're putting a lot of burden on the HTML to stay the same.
And there's fragility there,
Right. All right.
Well, I mean, I think parent is probably quicker though, isn't it? Because you're basically, that's the native DOM API, you're just going parent node, which, there's nothing faster than that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know the HTML structure is going to stay the same,
right?
Then, and you're just thinking about performance, then it's going to be faster. But
right.
I do agree with you, it looks quite ugly, I think, yeah.
Excellent.
Just real quick, we were talking about self-executing functions. Page 40 and 41, JavaScript, the good parts. Douglas Crockford does not wrap his function twice or even once. He just does it. He just executes it at the end. So
just boom, throw some parentheses
that's
there.
Terrible.
Go.
I feel like my dad just came in here and was like, "Do as I say, not as I do," and it's just not the same.
Wow, I want to see, like, I think we should probably, I'm on the O'Reilly site, and I think we should submit O'Reilly, submit errata, because that is just terrible.
Right.
Alright, cool. James, we want to thank you for joining us on yayQuery. It was definitely something that we were looking forward to, so this has been great. Thank you very much.
James, can you tell all our friends out in yayQuery land how they can find you and talk to you and read your blog?
Do you want them to talk to you? Yes, of course you do.
Yes. My website is james.padolsey.com. You won't be able to spell my second name, so you might as well just click on the link if it's there. And from there you can find out pretty much everywhere else that I am on the net.
Yeah.
And
James's Twitter, James's GitHub, good things to follow. And
We
Sorry,
especially wanted to thank James for staying up late with us. It's pretty late in the UK compared to the US, so props on that. Everybody, where you are, whether you're in your office, your car, go ahead and give him a round of applause now. It might sound weird to the people not listening, but he would really appreciate it, I think. So.
And I also want to point out that James is interested in any job inquiries and is interested in good quality full-time employment. So if you're looking for someone who kicks ass at JavaScript, ring him up because he's definitely your man.
Amen.
Thanks, Paul.
Word. All right, James, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks very much for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Yay!
Thank you very much.
It's the plugin of the week, and it's really, really great. It's the plugin of the week. Yeah!
Plugin of the week this week is not a plugin of the week. The creator of the jQuery 3 dots plugin, Mr. Jeremy Horn, created an awesome plugin of the week badge that we now officially authorize him to use on his plugin of the week. And we will also allow anyone who wins plugin of the week in the future, who has been a plugin of the week, to start using our sweet new plugin of the week badge, which is probably pictured on screen as I'm talking.
Hopefully, if whoever edits this crap is any good at this, maybe he'll get it right this time.
Who knows?
All right, I think that is it for us. And so we would like to thank our sponsors, which is TinyCDN for all your content delivery needs, and Devotee for all your expression engine needs as well. If you have both, you could use both in tandem. We would also like to thank Adam's new HD camera by Kodak for having him not transfer through time video-wise throughout the whole episode. And we would like to thank you for watching us, and Yaymes Padolsey for visiting us so late. Everyone have a wonderful week until we see you next time. Thanks.
Bye.